host, Kevin Barrier, and welcome to 5 Dubs Marketing Pros, where we highlight awesome brands and the stories behind them, and maybe just maybe geek out on all things marketing. All right, friends. So on the last Marketing Pros episode of 2025, I think we have an awesome guest here today. So you know the moment when you're staring at a blank screen, not really sure what your next social media post should say, or, wondering if you're even talking to the right people, or maybe even worse, talking to no one at all. So our guest today understands that pain that small businesses face because she's made a business out of solving that very pain. So today we're focusing on branding and brand clarity, marketing focus, and how to simplify your business message to attract the right clients with the right messaging. And our guest today is a master of just that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sue Kirchner of Brand Strong Marketing. Hi.
Hello. Thank you for
How
having me on, Kevin. I'm very excited
Yeah,
to you today.
yeah. Thank you for taking the time. So, if you know anything about our Marketing Pros episodes, it's all around branding and learning about new brands and the awesome stories behind it. So when I stumbled across who you were or who you are in brand strong marketing, I said that this is perfect. It's like a natural podcast marriage. So first though, talk to me a little bit about you, how you got
Sure.
into the marketing and advertising and branding space and kind of how that led you to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have kind of a varied background. I've worked in international, but I've always worked in marketing. And I was lucky enough when I got out of school, instead of being pigeonholed into a marketing track like, oh, you're a writer, copywriter, or oh, you're someone who buys print, or oh, you're someone who does that. I went to work at Motorola, which is not a marketing company at the time, but cell phones were just coming out. It was a very exciting time to be there and to start selling products and things like that. But because I grew up in Latin America and spoke Spanish, I got to do everything for cell phone marketing, which was exciting. So whether it was PR, event marketing, trying to come up with messaging for our Latin American customers and all that kind of good stuff. I got a wide range of exposure to different types of marketing. And it was absolutely fascinating. But what I began to realize was none of that works if you don't understand the foundation of what is your value proposition? What does the brand of the company bring to even a distributor who's selling the product and things like that? So that's where I started to fall in love with going back to the roots or the beginning of the marketing process, which was branding, and really trying to help companies understand how they compete, how they're unique. So as my career evolved, I went to work for a brand strategy company, helped them fill out, figure out their deliverables and how it was different from the advertising agency that the owner had started originally. Then went off on my own with some of the people from that agency, and we created our own brand strategy firm that we grew for about 6 or 7 years, focused on mergers and acquisition marketing because that's where the brand really, really came into play for us. And then moving on to building my own brand with an online store, which taught me everything about you can have a brand, you can have an online presence, but if you aren't doing people to drive traffic, or if you aren't doing things to drive traffic to your site, you're not going to grow. That's where I learned all about how do you stand out from the clutter and how do you attract people online to your business. But wrapping all of that up, that led me to where I am today, which is brand strong marketing. And my passion is I love helping small businesses get beyond that $1 million mark. I want to see them grow. I want to give them the tools and the resources and the insights in order to see their vision of where they could take their company come alive. And that all starts with the brand, understanding who you are, what you do, who you serve, and how you're different.
Yeah, and I think, I think understanding your brand and or analyzing your brand, understanding your brand, and really getting a good sense of who you are and how people perceive you. I mean, that like
Mhm.
that is the foundation, right?
Absolutely.
And you and I have spoke offline about like the importance of, at times taking a step back, right? Like especially if it's a small business, like an undercapitalized solopreneur, entrepreneur, trying to slingshot to orbit,
Right.
what they believe their brand is in their mind and what or how consumers perceive their brand many times. I won't say more times than not, but many times are two very different things. So
Right.
when, when you take a step back, one thing that comes to mind for me is like clarifying your brand,
Absolutely.
getting some clarity. So talk to me a little bit about, what brand clarity really means for small business owners when they want to take their business to the next level within marketing efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I like to say that, brand strategy or even working with someone like me, a brand strategist, is what you do before you spend any money on marketing. Because I have met so many small business owners throughout my career that are like, oh, I guess I'll work with you, but I've been burned so many times by my marketing agencies and I feel like we wasted money. And it's like, well, it's because you didn't do the foundational work. You did not tell the agency who your ideal customer was. You didn't clearly articulate how you were different from your competitors. You didn't tell them, what was the unique value proposition that you offer. And so then they had to kind of come up with their best guess, or hopefully it was better than a best guess, and run with marketing. So that's why it's really important to take the time to do that foundational work. And the way you do that to get this brand clarity is you talk to all of your important stakeholders because the brand resides in the mind of your audience, of your stakeholders. The best you can do as a company is to manage your brand, right? You can sit down and you can tell people from, here to there, this is what my brand stands for. But if your messaging isn't clearly articulating that, and more importantly, if your experience that you deliver to your customers is not backing that up, you do not have a strong brand. And you need to understand what that perception is in the minds of the people that you're trying to talk to. So, and that's where I help my clients is to get that clarity. We talk to your customers. We talk to your employees. We talk to maybe strategic partners. We might talk to people who refer you constantly. We may even talk to suppliers to try and figure out, all right, well, what is this organization? What does this company do that's so amazing that makes people want to work with them or that's really unique in what they're able to deliver? But you have to go out and you have to see how do they perceive you because that truly is your brand. So when I work with a small company, I'll say, all right, to the founder, to the owner, to the executive team, tell me what you think your brand is or what you want your brand to be. And then once we've done that research, 9 times out of 10, what they said is not what's being perceived out there, right? So how do you marry those two a little bit better? Is it the messaging that's off? And I help them figure that out. Or again, is it the customer experience that's off? And then what are the strategies that we can implement that start to align A and B in terms of getting them to understand what your brand is? But clarity, really, when you come down to it, is you know how to deliver your elevator speech when you walk into a room and you're networking or talking to a customer for the first time. It's looking at or it's making strategic decisions that will help to strengthen your brand as opposed to being scattered and take you in different directions. Clarity also allows the founder or leaders of a team to clearly explain where you're going to your employees. So everybody's marching in the right direction and supporting what you want to happen in terms of where the growth is. And it's also just looking at a strategic decision and saying, all right, this is good for us. This is going to bring us from here to there. And we can move forward. Clarity also, what sometimes companies don't think about is having clarity around your brand and what you stand for also applies to how you attract employees. So if you're looking to attract top talent, they want to come work for a company that really has either a strong brand or understands where they're going. And being able to articulate that is really important.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I mean, that is just a wealth of incredible information. One thing that really stands out to me is like understanding your value proposition, right?
Yeah,
So, you know, I can think back to dozens and dozens and probably hundreds at this point of onboarding or discovery calls or needs assessments with prospective clients. And when I ask, like, what sets you apart? Right?
yeah,
Because I mean, we are selfish beings. What's in it for me, right? If I'm going to
right,
align myself with the brand and spend my money on a brand, it has to provide me something I want, right?
right.
So I think really understanding not only what you believe your value proposition is, but then gut check it with how do consumers perceive your value proposition, I think is important. And a value
Yeah,
proposition is not, well, we really care about what we do, right? That's not a value proposition. We all care about what we do, and your competitors will say the same thing. So,
right.
finding what really sets you apart, I think, sets you up for success on now starting to put a product or service and that messaging in front of the ideal customer. And speaking of the ideal customer,
Yeah,
talk to me a little bit about when a brand does begin to really clarify who they are, who they are and why they matter.
right.
How does a brand start really in the right way identifying who their ideal customer looks like in like real actionable ways? How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. So the way it works is where I help my clients is ultimately we're trying to drive to an ideal customer profile, which is really just a one-page document, could be two-page, however, but I like to do it as a one-page document. It's a quick snapshot of who is your ideal customer. And to figure out who that ideal customer is, well, they are the ones who value your unique proposition, right? They value the service or the product that you sell them. They are loyal. They come back and buy more than once. They refer you to others. And most importantly, they are profitable for your organization, right? Because if you may, I've had some clients who are like, oh, we love working with this customer. And then when you get down to it, it's like, yeah, but you don't make any money with them. Maybe they refer you, but really at the end of the day, you're not making enough money from them because they're buying only services that are either low margin or they're pushing you a little bit on price and you say okay because you want to work with them. So it has to be profitable. But understanding your ideal customers, I like to tell my clients, go back and look through your CRM, look through your sales data. Who buys the most? Who is buying more than just one product from you? Potentially, are they buying a breadth of products? Even look at then like more intangible type data, like who's referred you, who has, and who is someone who is always talking about you to others, and you just find that absolutely fantastic, and they give you testimonials. Who are those people? And for some clients, it may be three key customers. For others, hopefully, it's like 10 to 20. And once we identify them, I ask them to, all right, let me interview them. Let me find out what they love about you. And more importantly, since we're trying to figure out who they are, what are their triggers? What are their characteristics? And not just demographics, but psychographics. What are their fears? What are their goals? What are their aspirations? What does their purchasing cycle look like if it's B2B versus, let's say, a retail consumer and things like that? Let's understand that. Where do they hang out? Where do they hang out online? What conferences do they go to? What industry associations do they belong to or magazines? Really, let's try and paint a picture of who this person is. And we look for patterns in that. And then I come back and say, okay, this is your ideal customer. So let's bring this to your sales team. When they're out prospecting, if they start having a conversation with someone who does not fit into this profile box, they might not be the best fit. They might not be profitable. They might push back on your pricing. They might not be loyal. They might just buy from you once and then move on. So it's really important to understand and to look back at who are the people that bring us the most money and are the biggest joy to work with. That's who we want to get more of. We want to attract those people. And once you understand that ideal customer profile, you can create messaging then. You can look at your brand and say, how do I articulate what my brand is to these people in a way that's going to cut through the clutter and the noise and attract them to working with you?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting in that is like I think businesses like they know what they want.
Yeah.
They may not know how to get there. And
Right.
that's where like the use and eyes come in of the world. And
Yeah.
I think, I think what's important really to underscore is if you really truly want to know who your customer is, you need to ask them who they
You need to
are.
ask them. Yep.
Yeah. And even sometimes that goes beyond just here, take my survey. Right.
Yeah.
When you look at these surveys are by and large around to build up your, Google My Biz reviews or Yelp reviews to increase your SERP rating or
Right.
SERP ranking, right? So, really using reviews for the purposes of what reviews were invented to be.
Yeah.
Who would have thought it could give you a lot of valuable information? So I think really taking the time to get that data, but then to really digest that data and then disseminate that out to your revenue generators within your organization is huge. And you mentioned, once you've identified that ideal consumer or ideal prospect for your business, then you can start tailoring messaging that really resonates with that consumer based on where they are,
Right.
right? Where are they hanging out online or where are they hanging out in real life, right? Because then the next step is you have to mold the messaging. And then after that, you have to figure out how to get in front of them in a meaningful way. So,
Right.
talk to me a little bit about the content side because content is king.
Yeah.
It's king, queen, sometimes the town squire, right? Talk to me a little bit about how you help your clients figure out um, not only what to say, but how to say it.
Yeah.
Because that is such an important piece. Nothing else matters without that, because that's
Yeah.
where you're building up to, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And before I answer that real quick, let me just finalize our last question when we talked about, understanding and having clarity around who your ideal customer is. It's not just for messaging that you use that for, right? It helps you define new products that you're going to bring to market. It helps you look at your customer experience and say, wow, we could add a couple things here and make our experience better for them, or even add a service and things like that. So the brand is not always just about messaging; it's about everything, to be honest. Even where you might sell your product if you don't have your own locations or things like that. So that's the power of knowing the brand and knowing who your ideal customer is. But now
Yeah, see,
going,
and that's such a great point. I just want because a typical business owner may think so linear, right?
yeah,
And go right from one milestone to I know my brand, now how do I talk to them? Right. But
right,
understanding that there's an elliptical benefit
right,
to really understanding your brand on creating a better user experience that helps with retention, create new products that really resonate, that creates
right,
new revenue opportunity, right? So I,
right,
I think thank you for sharing because I think those elements are the ones that I think that is macro marketing, right? And when you have a business that's just looking to get to the next step as quickly
right.
as possible, I think those important steps along the way or detours that create a more scenic route, so to speak, I think are really foregone. So
Absolutely,
I think that's super
absolutely.
important. Yeah, we should
Yeah,
be charging for this information. I mean,
we
I
should
I, I
be.
think I think this episode we need to put a few bucks
Yeah,
to
we should put our Venmo QR code up in the
That's
corner.
right, yeah, if anyone wants to
You could donate.
Venmo Sue or I, we'll have it in the show notes, absolutely.
Absolutely. But yes, but to go back to your question, okay, let's go back to content and how do you make it relevant and things like that. So as you said, content is king. It's important for so many reasons, not only just to tell your story, but it's a way to be authentic. It's a way to get your voice out there so people get a little bit of a feel for who you are. Because even if it's a product that you're buying in a retail store, we still, as humans, we want to have a relationship with the brand or with the product or the service that we're buying. So we need to get to know you, right? So we vote with our dollars. And a lot of times, we buy, so, there's a lot of things that we buy that maybe it's just because it's lowest cost or it's on sale or things like that. But in general, I think as consumers, we buy with our dollars. We buy where we like the company or the person or the salesperson that we want to do business with. So you need to get that authenticity out there. But going back to your interviews, with your customers to figure out your ideal customer profile, that's also a time to say, okay, what did they say their challenges were? right? What were they concerned about? Or maybe even in the interview, you could ask them and say, "Hey, if someone could educate you on something, or if there was an article you wanted to read, what would that be?" Those are the ways that you kind of pull together. Gosh, what kind of content should we be creating in order to attract them to answer the questions, to really showcase? You want to showcase and say that we understand you, we get you. Excuse me, and your content gets that across through having information, educational or inspirational, even sometimes around what that customer wants. So, but the other thing that's important about those customer interviews and how do you get your content out there to be relevant is listen to the language they use. Because there's so many times where I might have a client who's like, "Well, I'm talking about my products and services in this way." But when I interviewed their customers, they talked about it in a completely different way. They used different words. They almost even sometimes said, "Oh, our industry is different." And so you need to make sure that you understand their language. So when you're writing your content, you're using the same phrases, words, um, you know, um, industries, tones that you find that your customer is getting across. And as part of your brand identification foundation and audit, you should also get at, what is my voice, right? So when you're getting your content across, a lot of times there may be times where I'm explaining something to you that the person down the street could have explained that same thing to you. It wasn't necessarily unique, but it's part of what I need to get across to you so that you understand, the branding point that I'm trying to make. But the language I use, the tone that I use, maybe even whether I use humorous stories versus serious stories, am I more conversational versus being more traditional? That tone of voice for your brand is also a way that you can differentiate your content in a way that's going to resonate with who your ideal customer is. But again, it's going back, your content has to be something around what your customer cares about. So, and usually what your customer cares about is how do you solve my problem? So you need to write about, well, what is the problem? Then maybe you need to write about what is a way to solve that problem? Then maybe you need to write about, well, here is how we uniquely solve that problem. And so it kind of drives them through this kind of storytelling arch or funnel of how we might be the best option for you to solve your problem. And that's the way you can kind of set up your content. But as you and I were talking about on my podcast, the Turbo Branding Show, we talked a lot about AI, right?
Yes.
Well, content is also king for AI because AI is changing search going forward in the future. In the fact that people are going to Google right now and they're looking for something to solve their problem. So, how do I find something, to do this? Or how do I get someone to help me with this? So they're going and they're putting those in as their search terms, and Google's coming back with all the, links traditionally of where you can go and find that information. But now with AI and AI generative search, it's coming back with an answer for that particular customer or client who's looking for a solution. And so what's happening is AI is going out and finding content that it thinks answers that question the best and showing that in their generative AI description. So what's happening now is the customer sees that. It's like, oh, great. I got the answer to my question. I don't need to go to any websites. I don't need to go visit anybody's site to get an answer to the question. But if I love the description that was in that generative AI, I'll look over to the right and I'll see that, gosh, here are the sources that the AI language model pulled together to give me that answer. And if I really am ready to buy now, because a lot of times when you're just looking for answers, you're not ready to buy. You're just doing research. But when I am ready to buy and I see something interesting, then I can click on those sites. And now I'm further and deeper into the funnel. Than I would be if I was going clicking through website after website to try and put the answer together myself. So content is king in that it needs to be relevant to your customer. It needs to answer their questions, be what they want to read about. It also needs to be authentic to you. So that's where your content needs to include your unique stories, because you also want to make sure that your content doesn't come across as AI generated, That's part of the authenticity, right? Is AI can come up with a great blog post for you, so to speak, if you ask it to, but it could have put that same blog post together for anybody else. So how do you make it uniquely yours? Well, you need to change some of the words, you need to change the language, but more importantly, you need to put your stories in and your point of view and your experience into that content. That's what's going to attract your ideal customer. And it also needs to be going forward, it needs to be formatted in a way that's going to be AI friendly. So lots of questions and answers in the way that you write your content or write your blog post, so to speak. Or even think about the fact that how does your customer want to consume the content? Is it even a blog post or does it need to be video? Because everybody loves video now. In fact, almost most queries and most information gets answered through video now. And so that's really important. When you're interviewing your customers, ask them how they consume their information. And if it's all video, well, gosh, you better be producing video, or you're not being considered at all when they are looking for a solution to their problem.
Yeah, and I think so in the video side, I love that you brought up video because it's spinning in my mind when you talk about like here are the key things that a brand needs to address within their content. What's the problem? Or recognize that the problem exists and say, if you are experiencing this problem or you have this need, here's how we will solve that problem or fulfill this need. And a great example of a format that has taken the world by storm, thanks
Uh-huh.
TikTok and short form verticals, are short form vertical videos, right? I mean, the
Mhm.
strategy behind short form vertical videos are to be authentic, not overly produced,
Right.
to put a face to the brand,
Yep.
um, to have a text hook that's going to capture you in the thumbnail that inferences the problem that you may have.
Right.
And then within the first 3 seconds, recognize the problem and say you have a solution. So I think,
Absolutely.
short form is such a great example. And there's so much more that goes into short form verticals. I think businesses when they're creating video content, because it looks easy, they think
Yeah.
it's easy, but there's a tremendous amount of strategy. And
Right.
speaking to the AI side from search results, you're absolutely right. I mean, Google is sacrificing revenue, Google ad revenue with the interest of building up its AI model, Gemini, through
Right.
their AI overview answer, right? I mean,
Yep.
paid search is down below the scroll now.
Absolutely.
And I think depending on the business that you need to be, if you're a service-based business, you will need to approach uh basically what I guess you call it AEO, AI engine optimization, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to coin that AEO. So which is the cousin of SEO. So, if you're a service-based business, you want that AI model to say, if you're having HVAC issues in the dead of winter, here's the number to call.
Right.
If you are an e-commerce or product based business, you'll want to drive traffic to your website so people can shop virtually. And
Yes.
if you're anywhere in between, you'll need to address your AEO somewhere in between there.
Right.
But so when we're walking through kind of this and very abbreviated journey, but kind of journey on understanding who you are and why you matter as a brand, how consumers perceive your brand, how do you
Hmm.
address that from a messaging standpoint? Like I feel like, okay, so I have the pieces of the puzzle together, but
Right.
I still need to build that puzzle. So once I have all of that, what does a real marketing plan maybe look like for, a small business that's really eager to scale but may feel undercapitalized? Or maybe perhaps how would I approach that as an SMB that's looking to use all of this information I have at my fingertips now to really put together a cohesive plan that really strikes?
Right. So a real marketing strategy, there's a couple components to that. So the first is I always tell my clients and help them walk through. You have short and you have long-term strategies that are going to help you grow, right? And when you're trying to build a relationship, and especially with brand building, that's all long-term. So that's where social media comes in, where you try and build a relationship, two-way conversation. So do you have, is that in your plan? But maybe you're at a point where you're like, you know what, we're about to enter a brand new market. We're looking for a little bit more of a short term gain and things like that. So I try and say, when we look at the activities in the marketing plan, and it has to be realistic, we have to do a couple things. One is we need short term activities that'll try and drive business a little faster. I mean, I always tell my clients, someone's like, well, I need sales tomorrow. I need sales tomorrow. It's like, okay, well, then you either need to be dropping big discounts or it's a sales problem, not a marketing problem. You need people calling. You need people on the phone, going out and reaching out to customers and things like that. But for a, let's say, campaign where you want to move some product or enter a new market over a 90-day period of time and things like that, there are some short-term tactics that you can apply. Um, there's also longer term tactics that need to be in your marketing program that are like the social medias or content marketing, creating videos, things like that. But then one thing that I find small business owners often forget to do, and especially when it comes to their marketing activities, is 60 to 70% of your business should come from your existing customers. Where in this plan are you talking to them? Are you reaching
Exactly.
out to them? Because that is often forgotten. When I talk to a lot of prospects and things are like, I want leads. I just want leads. I want new customers. I want leads. And then I'll step back and I'll say, yeah, but what are you doing to keep the people you already have? What are you doing to deepen that loyalty? How are you getting a bigger share of their wallet? So a realistic marketing plan will also have activities that are reaching out to your existing customer base and trying to upsell them, cross sell them, make sure they understand everything that you can do for them as opposed to just this one service or this one product. So in that case, then tactics like email marketing, reaching out to, you already have their email address, you can reach out to them, try and upsell them, keep the communication going. Social media, having a two-way communication. Maybe it's even offering free webinars or things like that. So, but it goes back to when you talk to your customers up front with your research, your marketing plan needs to reference where they hang out, like we were talking about earlier. So, is the best way to reach them one on one at a conference? Should you be doing speaking engagements where instead of talking one on one to someone, you're talking to many, and you're offering value and explaining your brand and things like that? But really, for small business owners, the thing I like to say for a marketing plan to be realistic is you have to have the time, energy, and budget to be able to consistently implement it. And I've had small business owners, let's say solopreneurs or small consulting firms and things like that. And they're just like, oh my gosh, we had this plan and it looked awesome. And the minute we started to try and implement it, we didn't have time. We didn't have the budget to outsource it. So we pared it back. I know small businesses that have maybe one or two tactics on their marketing plan, and that's it, because that's where they can be consistent and that's where they can make sure that they are constantly in front of people by doing these one or two things.
Yeah,
So
and not only doing one or two things, but doing them really well,
well, exactly.
right? Doing them really well, but then also recognizing that, leave it to us marketers. I bow my head in this. Like, we used and abused email, right?
Yeah,
During the COVID pandemic, that was the way that businesses reached out to, or the primary way that businesses reached out to consumers, and it's in abusing that tactic, it's created a shift, and now that shift is email is still absolutely important,
right,
but now you have to kind of tie it with like SMS, right? And getting S,
right,
but and we will abuse and use and abuse that beyond belief. I would say by the end of 2026, and something new will come to be. But I think having a clear picture of your bandwidth, right? If
right,
you're at that spot where you want to do everything, but you can't, but you recognize it's going to take too long, or you don't have the resources to do it yourself, but you're not in a position to outsource, you have to restrain and pare back and get to the point where you can outsource it or bring in more people. The great thing about agencies is that it expands. You're bringing on a fractional marketer, or a
right,
fractional marketing team within
right,
within your organization. So really understanding, sometimes I think the best entrepreneurs and the best leaders of industry, they will recognize when they don't have a strength in something, and then finding the people that do.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. And another thing to think about too that small business owners, I have seen some amazing examples and even talked to people on my podcast about how they're branding, building it. And again, going back to that, what are you doing to build loyalty with the people who already know you, have bought from you, love your service and things like that? There are some amazing retail outlets, let's say, small businesses that are retailers that are building community around events. There was an example of a knit shop in Minnesota that does these cruises. You get on a boat with a bunch of people who love to knit just like you do, and you spend the day knitting and socializing and things like that. That is an event that engenders an incredible amount of loyalty to that store and builds a brand. There's things you do. I know accounting firms that will hold a lunch and learn for their clients where you come and you can socialize and you can meet other people in the community. You get some education. Those are things that should not be forgotten in the marketing plan because building a community and offering experiences, number one, they're unique. Not a lot of people do them, but number two, it's a way for you to authentically be in front of these people and build stronger loyalty and deepen their understanding of what you do and who you serve. And oh gosh, there's other customers around here that are just like me, so I'm in the right place buying from you.
yeah, and small opportunities to upsell, so to speak. Maybe not upsell your product, but
Mm.
capture that prospect within, new marketing channels.
Right.
If you're not following all our social, follow it, right? You want to sign up
Yeah.
for our e-newsletter. Hey, take this quick survey and let's have a conversation while you spin this wheel, because everybody at an event, if you go to an event, bring a wheel, a prize wheel. It's, I think, psychologically human beings have to spin a
We
wheel
have
when they
to
see it.
spin it.
You have to spin the wheel. And while that wheel is spinning about and the consumer is anxiously awaiting what prize they've won, the little branded knickknack that you'll get, it gives that brand an opportunity to have a conversation. We had, so for our press association, every year we have a conference for our members, and we have sponsors that come and exhibit at our conference. And there was one that I think it was pretty, like, it was so almost going back to grassroots efforts, but it worked so well. They brought in a caricaturist.
Oh,
And thinking about, like, when you have somebody, when you have the publisher of a news organization sitting there getting their caricature done, you have a salesperson sitting there that's talking to them. So
right.
you have someone sitting. It was genius. I mean, they had a line. It
Yeah,
was it was incredible, and it was something so simple as and so intuitive, as that I think could really affect change.
absolutely.
So let me ask you this. Oh, let me ask you this first. So you were mentioning, is there a brand that you've worked with that, you mentioned, you've seen and you've worked with brands that have really taken these steps seriously, and with your help have been able to grow and affect change. Is there a brand you'd like to shout out that's doing it really well?
Sure. I would love to give a shout out to one of my clients. It was the Busy Beaver Button Company.
Okay.
They're based out of Chicago. They started with making buttons for rock bands way back when. I think they're celebrating I think it's 30 years now, which is amazing. But they provide a lot of promotional ideas. But what I helped them do was come in and we really honed in on their brand in terms of you're not just selling buttons and pins and things like that. You're helping an organization communicate a message that's going to affect change, right? So they do a lot of work with nonprofits. Do a lot of work with, craft breweries and rock bands and things like that. It's they're helping people build their brand and get their message out there to affect change. And whether that is change the world, volunteer, or purchase a product, or explore something new. But what was very interesting about them was when I did the audit and we did the brand research together, they are a woman-owned business. They have a lot of sustainable practices. She actually started the Button Museum, which just shows her passion for this particular medium of the buttons. So it's amazing. But what I loved about it was when we did the audit, going back to what is your brand? She was highlighting and leading with the fact that it was a women-owned business with sustainable practices. But really, when I talk to their customers, they're like, that's nice, But why we work for them is their service is amazing. Their product is amazing. Every time we call, we talk to someone, we have a relationship with them. We so admire how unique their branding is. It's very whimsical and things like that. And so it was interesting to come back to her and say, "Oh my gosh, what you're doing is amazing. People love it, but you need to lead with different messaging. You need to lead with the service from a friend. You need to lead with, some of the other tangible, or I should say, more tangible and valued aspects of your business practices than just being women owned." And that was eye opening for her. But I think they do a fantastic job with their marketing and their service. And I highly recommend people to go shop with them.
Yeah, so I am fairly certain I've seen somewhere within the
Yes.
social space about the Button Museum. And
Yes.
so I'm assuming that probably got some press at some point because
It
I
did get
saw
some press. Yeah.
that's incredible. So, and I'm on their website right now. That is busybeaver.net.
Yep.
And it's interesting because you bring up a good point is, and I think this is something and this is I think hard, perhaps, and maybe I'm not quite uh accurate on this, but for a business owner, the business owner says, it's our customers really love the sustainability and sustainable practices that we
Yep.
deploy out there because that's what matters to me as a
Right.
business owner. That is, I'm leaning into that. Maybe I'm spending more on raw material that's sustainably sourced, perhaps that checks off that box. But consumers are in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, they'll see that at best as well, not at best, but they'll see that as a tertiary benefit. And the
Right.
primary benefit is the quality's great and
Yes.
it's easy to order buttons and I get a good turnaround time. And man, if I go and I go to their site, I can get $50 off if I spend 250 or more. That just popped out. These are
Yeah.
all things that resonate with me as a consumer if I'm a business looking to order buttons. So um
Absolutely.
I think it's great for that gut check. So for everyone, anybody, I'm assuming they ship nationally. That's my
Yes,
guess
they
here.
do.
They
Yep.
ship nationally. Busybeaver.net. Maybe we'll have Busy Beaver's founder on to talk about this brand and the awesome story behind that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So as we close out, let me ask you this. For a business owner that is listening to this
Yes.
and they're like, man, I need to call Sue because I
Okay.
need to address my brand.
Sure.
Um, but I want to think first on to set myself up for success. What is like a simple, actionable thing that a small business owner can do now to kind of lift themselves out of that branding fog? What does that look like? What is one simple thing they could do?
One simple thing that they can do is they can definitely, what I like to say is pick up the phone and call one or two of your best customers and just start talking to them and say, "Hey, I'm looking to improve our brand and I'm looking to improve our messaging. And do you mind if I ask you some questions about why you enjoy working with us?" Right. And go through, and I actually, on my website, I have a list of 10 questions you should ask your customers to identify your brand, and it's free to download. But have that conversation. That's one thing that you can do, that's very simple to try and build a stronger brand and have better, more relevant messaging. Another thing you can do as a quick win would be to, again, think about an event. Is there something I can do? And it depends on your customer base. If you're online and your customers are nationwide, maybe it has to be a virtual event or something like that, or it can be something local. But get it, do something that pulls your existing customer base closer to you and offer them a great experience or an educational webinar, speech, something like that. And then while you're there, like you were talking about the salesperson sitting next to you while you're getting a character or thing like that, just start talking to them. How can we serve you better? Is there a challenge you're having that no one is solving for you? Maybe that's
Yeah.
something we could solve for you and think about and just do those kinds of things. So those to me are quick wins, is always talk to your customer, and get that out there. And the other thing I've seen so many times, which is heartbreaking sometimes, but I'll talk to a client and I'll say, "All right, do your customers know everything you can do for them?" well, no, they came in buying a specific service. I'm like, yeah, but you've grown over the years that you've been servicing them. You have these additional. Why haven't you told them about that? Why haven't you told them you do these other things? So the opportunity to upsell or cross sell is something that I think a lot of small business owners, you get wrapped up in trying to get new customers, that you don't stop and say, hey, did we ever tell our existing customers that we do this new thing now? Let's go back and let's share our service, our entire breadth of services with them, and try and move forward from there.
Yeah, and I think, remarketing to existing clients is a fraction of the price as trying to secure and onboard a new customer or client or
Yes.
what have you. It's just like
Yes.
hiring practices. Any HR manager will tell you that. So
Yes.
I think that's great. Yeah, don't, show your existing customers some love.
Yeah.
Those existing customers are going to be your biggest advocates and referrals
Yep.
to open up opportunity for new opportunity.
Yes.
So this has been me. So for anyone listening to this, uh, give Sue a call or check out her website. Check out her website. Take the 10 questions to ask your customers to identify your unique brand. You can go to brandstrongmarketing.com. Right on the right side, you'll see the free ebook to identify your unique brand, and go take it. We'll make sure that that link is in our show notes as well. And I hope this has been an absolute masterclass. I mean, they always say that you should always give away your best product and best content for free, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think we've checked that mark off. So thank you so much for taking the time. And again, let's highlight your podcast again. Where can I
Yes.
find your podcast? Because
Yeah.
Sue has an awesome podcast that I was a guest on too. So
Yes. Kevin was a guest. We had a great conversation. So it's called the Turbo Branding Show. And the objective of the podcast is similarly, it's to help small business owners understand how important the brand is, but then also what can you do to identify it and move forward. I talk to a lot of business owners, talk to experts like yourself, Kevin, and try and make it as entertaining as I can. But it's the Turbo Branding Show. You can find it on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify.
there you go, Turbo Branding Podcast, and we will have that in the show notes as well. So
Okay.
I think with that, we have given so much amazing information. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you have an amazing rest of 2025, and I'm excited to stay connected with you in 2026. And for any brand out there that needs some help, you need to be calling Sue ASAP
Yeah.
and starting that conversation. Brandstrongmarketing.com. And until next time, see you.
Thank you.
5 Doves Marketing Pros is hosted by me, Kevin Barrier. Our executive producer is MDDC Executive Director Rebecca Snyder. Our theme music is by Azulu Studios. A special thanks to our guests for being with us. You can find 5 Doves and 5 Doves Marketing Pros on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.